Hello. It seems that we had some technical difficulties on Streamlabs, not Streamlabs, OBS, and I thought I was streaming the whole time, but anyways, this is your host Polybloom, and we're gonna be continuing some creepypastas tonight. This was a unusual predicament. Hopefully this doesn't happen again, ever. Alright. So is the stream working? We're gonna do a shorter story this time. We're gonna be reading. It's gonna be another hot one. Written by Jake M. It started as quiet as remarkable summer, as far as summers usually go in the city. It became swing, swidden, some, swingler, something hot within days of spring ending. Cooling the opening of windows and turning of the fans across every neighborhood, every room washed in dim lights, baked in the soundtrack of their industrious whirring. A silent servant functioned as an intended sucking in the cool nighttime air to combat the latent heat of the day, emulating something, a breeze where there was none. Owners grateful for their service as they lay comfortable in their beds, not sleek with sweat and sticking to the sheets like they would be without AC units sets at home. Apartments building in behind houses, rumbling with a similar zeal, forcing with the balmy air through. Something coiling up the pipes, flowing with collets to achieve a similar effect. Albeit more effective, either are more of those miracles of the modern world made the regular torrid summers of the more bearable for the inhabitants of the city until it became hotter than everybody expected. It didn't change too notably. A scorcher of a day here, a hot one here, but they quickly became routine, day after day of 100% degree Fahrenheit temperature. Only the shade and the night providing refuge of the hellish heat. The entire city became wrecked in discomfort, some citizens taking in remains inside, with the braver and bolder folks content to just scorch outside as they walk. The source of the abnormal heat was a topic of debate. Hey Miku, sorry about that last stream. You're going to sleep early when it turned 10? Oh. Alright, this is a very short story. Inside the braver and topic of debate. Conversations amongst friends, neighbors, and eventually news sources, regardless of whether a bizarrely warm summer came from. It's only continued to heat up from then on, previously hanging around the hundreds. It quickly shot out to a daily average to upper 110s to late June. The pavements scorch, plastic trash can melt, and the sideways quickly became abandoned. At the height of the day, the gentle rumbles of the box fans and AC units can turn into a constant roar, turning 27 turning 24 to 7 in the increasingly Fahrenheit. Futile attempt to keep the temperatures within people's homes bearable, lying shirtless in their beds, sweat-soaking citizens with toes and turned restless, cursing their lousy fans, cursing the heat, cursing the fact that they couldn't just tear their skins off and free themselves in their sweatering and confining biological layers. The hottest summers of the century, as people call it, continued its rampage until July, where temperatures regularly soared around 120 degrees and above, the wailing of the ambience rushing through the prune and unconscious bodies of those foolish enough to take a stroll at noon because commonplace were the wiser citizens, obtaining to live in the darkened selections surrounding by fans, are in pools of ice-cold water in their backyards every morning, and the radio and TVs would say the same thing over and over. It's gonna be another hot one. Their range howly. One could hear how tired they were, tired of how the air was becoming almost painful, like sticking one's entire body into an oven, and one could almost hear the glee in their voices when they finally found something else to talk to about one day, even if it was something extremely particular. Barbara Mari, a 77-year-old resident of the city, made a discovery this morning that it was first alarming and then confusing. The anchor reads over the staticky crackles of the television. She found what appeared to be a blood dripping from her window AC unit. He continued over some macabre images of a boxy air conditioner leaking thick, dark red fluid from the slated parts of the fan. Dripping down into the carpet below, an unsettling discovery as further investigations revealed the blood was having no apparent source, and no evidence of it having been placed into a unit prior, and it would have been fine. Just another strange happening from a book, another bizarre bit of urban legends feel had it not continued to happen across the city. Amidst the frightening heat was a equally as horrific epidemic of bleeding appliances, and as the heat soared, more AC units, box fans, and more cooling instruments would weep. In particular, something liquid. The blood stopped pouring once the appliances were cracked open to investigate its source. But with the first reported occurrences with the blood, Mr. Murray, there was none. Even more puzzling was the fact that the devices that continued to be plugged and working would continue to bleed, even beyond the volume put out by devices that would have been torn open with the investigations. It was extremely unsettling with the persistent and frequently dangerous heat left many with one other option than just learn how to live with it. There wasn't enough ice in the world to keep them cooled off without an AC unit or a box fan, or even one of those cheap desk fans, even if it meant their homes and apartments would carry a permanent coppery stench that would make them heave every time they walked in. Even if the red stains on the walls carpet keep getting worse, even if it left them constantly distracted by the concentrating applications of the machines that bleed what is apparently indistinguishable from the blood we humans have. They were all things they could live with just to make it through the hottest summer of the century until the welding started. Yes, ooh indeed. Ooh. Nobody wanted to admit it, but people swore that they could hear through the restless rumble of their appliances late at night. Pain moaning, difficult to describe. It was akin to a man being slowly crushed by gears of an enormous machine. Wheezy and wrenched in agony, it was another stone atoned the crushing weight of the trial of the residents of the city were being put through, atoned the heat and blood as if some cruel Old Testament God was making some endure a series of worsening plague. It was an isolating terror because it hasn't. As if you could ask your neighbor, how does your air conditioner cry at night too, without worrying if you were the only one who had lost your mind? The citizens continued to ignore it, ignore how loud it would get, ignore how they would wake up in a cold sweat from nightmares from being mangled to death, ignore how humans crying sounded. Moaning turned into sobbing, turned into wailing, turned into screaming. The catacomb, some a mechanical roaring and horrific crying echoing through the city, bouncing off of skyscrapers and brick buildings alike, amplifying the noise into the terrifying mechanized wall. Now that finally scared you. Good. Hehe. Well, wait, there's more. One morning, August 1st to be exact, people watched from their windows as a man dressed in nothing but boxers threw his fan from the window into the road below and emerged from the apartment with a sledgehammer. The fan was still licking blood, still screaming in mechanical agony when the man brought the sledgehammer down upon it, cracking in its half. He continued to swing the hammer down again and again and again. Blood splattered across the warning something until it was nothing but in a pile of red plastic and metal, and the screaming stopped. Everybody in the streets followed suit, destroying their cooling appliance in the act of apparent fury, taking baseball bats in their fans, crowbars in their AC units, smashing them until piles of blood-soaking junk litter the streets and sidewalks like the many mechanical cadavers, reeking like a jar of pennies. Somebody left the hot car by setting of the sun. Screaming was gone. city silence. For the first time in weeks, citizens stood amongst the mascara of the appliance, wondering if because they bled and screamed, could they not feel pain? And because they could feel pain, because they could bleed and scream and beg, were they not alive? In a sense, was that they did an act of mercy or murder? They laid their own weapons upon the ground next to the carnage and walked inside the sleep, awaking in a puddle of sweat, to the radio cheerfully announcing, as if nothing's happened, it's gonna be a hot one. Credits by Jake M. That one's a pretty short story. So what do you think of that story, Miku? Was it scary? Scary enough. Oh, the music was scary. Yeah, the music is definitely scary. That's why I picked it. It's kind of scary. Yeah, it was kind of scary. Let's see how long is this one. We could read this one. My First Apartment. Written by Jennifer Scrimbiff. Can't really pronounce the last name. I'm gonna take a last sip of water before we get to reading. I was finally moving to my first place on my own. I was working two jobs to afford it, but it was a freedom I had never had before. I spent the first 6 years of my life moving from a crack house to crack house with my mother and living in my group home. Until I was 18, I lived with my roommates after that until I was 25, and I was lucky to get this place, one bedroom, second floor apartment in a 5-story building, smack dab in the middle of downtown Phoenix. I had never been so lucky in my life. 2 weeks later, I had the news that I had won a full scholarship of Arizona State University. Life was going so well. I admit it was tough working two jobs, going to job, going to school, but I knew it was temporarily. One day I would be able to work one job and get a house. I was determined and happy. I had lived in my new home for about 7 months. When it started, I came home and I noticed a drop of dark red liquid in the kitchen floor. I had pizza the night before, so I thought it was sauce, but I wiped it and it looked more like blood. Maybe I cut myself or something. I dismissed it and I went on with the evening. 2 days later, I woke up on my only day off in weeks, and the drop was back in the very same place. I quickly cleaned it up. I made thorough inspections on my body, looking for small cuts or scrapes, but only found a few bruises here and there. I chose to not think about it. I did not need anything added to my already full plate. About a week later, I came home late from my second job to find a small puddle of the liquid in my kitchen. Same spot. It was the size of a golf ball and shaped like a bow tie. I inspected the ceiling after that. I looked for the soft spot or stain or something, anything. The vent was way too far for anything to drip out and get where the liquid was. I was so tired, though. I was cleaned up, so I cleaned it up and crashed into bed. I slept restlessly. Over the next month, the red liquid would appear randomly in various amounts. Finally, told a co-worker, and she told me to take a picture and call maintenance. The next time a puddle shows up, I grabbed my phone and took a picture. This was also a shape like a bow tie. However, when I opened the picture to show my co-workers, it didn't show the liquid. It was just a picture of a yellow tie kitchen floor. I rationalized it by saying it must have been reflected the light and not showed up. But it disturbed me more than I wanted it to admit. I had a couple of days off and I was really looked forward to staying home and reading a good book, maybe even binge watching episodes of my favorite show. However, I looked up at my biggest puddle of the dreaded liquid I had yet to see. I immediately searched through the junk drawer and the pieces of paper number with the numbers of maintenance on it and called. They said it would be a couple of hours. I couldn't leave the plate-sized puddle on the floor for hours, so I cleaned it up. I couldn't help but to compare it to blood. It was the color, the thickness, and even smeared like you would see in movies. I tried really hard not to think about it. A bearded man named Stewart arrived a few hours later. He looked tired but cheerful. I told him what I was dealing with after beginning with. I know this sounds completely bizarre. He agreed with that sounded very strange, but with the sure there was an explanation for it. He got down on the floor and looked under the cabinets, in the fridge, in the dishwasher. He then went and got a step ladder to inspect the ceiling. He didn't find anything, and I felt some serious disappointment. He stepped down from the ladder on the step ladder and asked a few questions about when I saw the stuff and what it looked like. I felt like I needed to prove that the blood-like liquid was real, so I pulled the trash can out from under the sink and showed him the paper towels I used to clean it up. The can was full of paper towels, but not a single red drop was on them. I cannot believe it. I muttered something about the invisible ink and swore I was telling the truth. Stewart put his stepladder in the hall and told me to call if the liquid shows up again. He was shaking his head as he walked out of the door. I had no idea what to think. Was I going crazy? Was the stress getting to me? More than likely, my mother had some form of mental illness. Maybe this is why she got hooked on drugs. Maybe I was going down on that path. I shook my head. No, I was different. I was holding a 3.5 average in school, and my bosses both said they were happy with my work. I wasn't going crazy. The next few weeks flew by. Examined busy season at work, and I had met a guy named Aaron from the first floor of my building. We had gone out for a few dates. I had forgotten about the evil red liquid until I came home from the work an earlier evening to the floor covered in it. It looked like an animal had been slaughtered. I ran out of the apartment and down to the stairs and knocked on Aaron's door. I told him the whole crazy story, and he suggested we get maintenance before going back up there. Stewart didn't look too annoyed that we were all in his door, and we all willing to go with us back to my apartment. However, when we walked in the door, the kitchen was spotless. Not a single sign of red anywhere. I stared in disbelief and shocked. I looked at the numbers on the door to make sure that they were in the right department. Even though it was my key that opened the door and my furniture was in the living room. Stewart and Aaron stood next to me, silent and awkward. I stumbled out of, I'm not lying or crazy, but evidence wasn't exactly backing me up. Stewart politely excused himself by saying something about his wife having dinner already. He shut out the door behind him, and I broke down in tears. I totally expected Aaron to run out and ghost me, but to his credit, he didn't. He stayed and helped me dry my tears. However, we didn't talk about it after that. It was the elephant in the room when he was at my place, though I almost hoped that just one time Aaron would see the blood on the floor too. Almost. Then came the horrific day in March. It was the 13th, but Tuesday I was almost done with school. I could see the finish lines. Aaron and I was getting serious and he had introduced me to his parents. We had just spent the day helping his sister move into her dorm, and we were going home to shower and change our clothes to go out for dinner. He walked me into my apartment. The smell hits us as soon as the elevator door opened. It was awful. I felt sick to my stomach. It was even worse in my apartment. I called Stewart, grabbed some clothes, and went into Aaron's back to his apartment on the first floor. The headlines of the local paper reads, 11 bodies found in serial killer's apartment. He had killed and dismembered at least 11 people and just left them on the floor of his kitchen. He had stabbed the bow-tie killer because he had a significant bow-tie collection in his closet. His kitchen was directly above mine. He was a quiet neighbor, and I only saw him once or twice on the elevator or by the mailbox. I would never have thought that he was capable of the crime he was convicted of. The strange thing that is that he had cleaned all the blood up. There isn't a pool on the floor or anything to soak into the tiles and down into my apartment. Poor Stewart helped with the cleanup and told me I was horrified and had nightmares for a while after that, but I felt relief that I wasn't as crazy as I was starting to think. I moved in with Aaron a week later, and they had to completely gut out the killer's apartment to get rid of the smell. Credit Jennifer Scrappeth. That's the end of that story. Did you like that story also, Miku? Ooh woo. Was it ooh woo scary? You hide? Nice. It means I did my job well. Let's do this one. You're out of the box, huh? Now it's time to get out of the box because we're gonna read another story. A story called The Tunnel. Hollow bodies knocking in my brain. They haunt my dreams, and with a silent scream, they driving me insane. Hollow bodies, faceless figures in the rain. Their pink striped suits and talented figures drill my skulls in endless pains. Hollow bodies, once humans, now parasites. They live inside us trying to spread, to drown our souls in endless dread. Hollow bodies, distorted what is real, numbing my bones so I can't feel. Blind to love, no chance to heal. Rain pulled in, collected along the cracked pavements, leading to the tunnel under the train tracks, unkept lawns. Half-stripped vehicles and broken down chains links, fences line each side of the streets. The lights above cast in eerie shadows over the gloomy paths, and quiet atmosphere setting to the bones like a cold fog. Discarded needles, broken bottles, baggies, thrown out condoms, beauty wrappers bob in the potholes, scattered throughout the neighborhoods. In the smell of urine creeps from the tunnels connecting in the streets of Portus Street. It's 10:30 p.m. and Lan is stumbling home from the bar. His footsteps are shaky, and his vision's bouncing between perfect clarity and dizzying double-sightedness. The streets is now normally taking 5 minutes to walk down, now look to be as long as an airport's runway. The rain poured down in increasingly intensity. It took ages to reach the stairs leading down to the tunnel. The lights cast a warm glow across his fields of view. A car passes on the opposite end. Lights flashes at the end of the barrel. There may be another way home, safer routes, but this was familiar ground. The lights from the tunnel cast a warm glow across his field of view as Lan's approach. The last couple of weeks, Lan had been having trouble sleeping, haunted by a strange about a night. Night of terrors. He found himself waking in the middle of the night with a feeling of being watched. The dreams were always being the same, an alleyway in some unrecognizable city, pursued as a group of faceless predators, almost human. The first time Lan had this dream, there was only one, but every time the dream reoccurred, there would be more of those figures. He stopped counting those 7. Every dream ended the same. They parked garage. Each time it seemed like they were about to reach out and grab him. He would wake up Lan assumed the night terrors would brought about distress. His work had been bruisers than usual lately. They were pitifully short-staffed. He worked for a landscaping company that was contracted by one of those new gated communities going up on the nearby mountainside. The projects kept stacking up, and to make matters worse, it was being called the rainiest fall on record on the last 10 years, since the boss didn't want Lane's crew rolling out of sudden rain. The focus this week was building a retainer wall on each property. The work was brutal. 5 of the staff members had been fired the previous week. They were getting high on their break time, and so the remaining 7 were carrying the load, working overtime every day of the last 2 weeks. The job paid well, and nobody was in the position to give that up. So Lan and the rest of the crew resigned to crumpling about the decisions whenever Jack and the other 2 bosses, Jeremy and Tom, weren't in earshot. Meanwhile, the days grew darker, and while the hours seemed to stretch on, and Lan's world became bleak and gray. Out of water. The nightmares became more vivid. Sleep now harder to find. Staying awake all night would be less exhausting. Instead, Lan lay on his back, letting his mind jump from a wall to the other side, from the daily confrontations at work to the next day, picking and chipping up the excess of his mind like a scab. Lan knew that he needed to calm down, find a way to sleep, so he could perform at work at the next day, and booze seemed to subdue the demons sometimes. Each night he would go to the bar, a short walk from home, and have a plate of food and as many drinks as he could swallow. Once the walls were spinning and bartenders spoke in broken, fragmented sentence. That was when Lan would settle his tab and walk home. Tonight was a little bit different, almost celebratory. After work had wrapped up this evening, Tom announced that to the team that they had hired a couple young guys to help with the labor. Sure, they were new and would need to get used to the rhythm, but the work was simple enough and the promise of the lighter load meant earlier days for the crew. Lan didn't feel the need to be exceptionally drunk tonight, and instead just employed a meal, a few drinks, and some small talks with the bartender. After downing his last gulp of whiskey and leaving cash on the table, Lan got up and began his journey home. The light from the tunnel was getting brighter. Lan's vision. As he approached the steps leading down, he noticed what appeared to be someone walking ahead of him through the tunnels. The individual was wearing a jean jacket, was red and black checkered hood. The black skinny jean was. As Lan entered the tunnel, he noticed the figure was not moving, just standing in the middle of the path, menacingly. The tunnel was quite small, so passing would be a tight squeeze. A chill crept down Lane's spine, which was attributed by the weather, and pulled the zipper up from his jacket, wanting to make his presence known. Lan called out, "Hey you, good man." The figure offered no response. Lan tried again. "Hello, sir?" The person still offered no response, and Lan began to feel that maybe he shouldn't be here. Without taking his eyes off the figure in front of him, Lan slowly beckoned away, carelessly stepping into the puddle with his left foot soaking through his runners. The sound echoed through the tunnel, and Lan noticed the figure's shoulders twitch. There is an oppressive atmosphere here. The air in the tunnel seemed to be thickened, and Lan found himself unable to move in any direction. The tunnel contorted, stretching to infinity and shrinking back, the walls on either side curving inward, like oceanic waves wiped up by a nearby hurricane. Lan felt the urge to bolt in the opposite direction, but his feet remained planted as if chained to the floor by an invisible restraint. The person turned to face him, and as he saw the details of the hooded figure, Lan's blood ran cold. Like the demon in his dreams, the creature had no describable features. Was this an unfortunate prank? Lane thought to himself, bargaining. Maybe it's just someone wearing a mask, trying to scare people for some twisted laughs. The creature approached Lane. As he struggled to pull himself away, the skin over the hooded being's face began to tear open the spot where his mouth should have been, a small stream of blood pouring from the ripping skin. The figure were still hidden in the jacket pockets where it was, but as it drew nearer, it left impulse, reaching out. Lane watched in awe, no longer wondering, because where fingers should have been, there was only long talons, sharp claws. Biggity-boo, boo. The demon brought its talons to where its face might have been and tore into itself, leaving a bleeding wound. Just for a cat-like grin with the many rows of teeth. Lan heard a chorus of wailing voices and thin mouth open wide, echoing through the rounded walls of tunnels. "Help! Somebody help! Someone fucking help me!" Lan cried, desperately, still unable to move. Lan felt an emergency drain out of his. Lane felt the energy drain out of his body, chills from his bones, and seemed to subside, almost warm, almost comforting. The hooded creature was leaning over him now. Drops of blood fell from his face, mixing with his own tears. The noises around him. Othram something chant, devoid of meaning, to scream nameless victims. The demon's claw entered Lane's face as he felt the pressure with no pain. Blood poured from 2 punctured wounds. The creature continued to cradle the back of Lance's head, digging the talons into either side of his skull, while the other claws slashes Lance's chest, reaching straight from his heart, crushing and breaking it while still inside of him. Was this a dream? Was this what it's like? This is what dying felt like. Darkness drowned his vision as he succumbed to the void. Paper news were delivered the next morning with the front pages column with the right hand sided, detailing reports of paramedics' presence in the tunnel of the Hedgewick Street. Callers reported a young man screaming in the empty tunnel, supposedly under the influence of what they assumed to be something. Ambulance arrived on a scene to find a 32-year-old man, Lane Martian, catatonic, according to the toxicology reports. Mr. Martian's blood alcohol was 12%. He was plenty drunk, for sure, but not enough to explain the erratic nature of the breakdown. There was no signs of the physical injuries during the interview of the psych ward. The only words Lang could muster was a disturbing representation of the eye glued open, frozen in fear, mumbled the words, hollow, 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 hollow bodies, tearing down my brain. Their silent scream still haunts my dreams. They're driven me insane. Credit by Kevin something. The authors' names are sometimes hard to read. But there you go. I think that's going to be our last story for tonight. Did you like that story? Was it spooky? Yeah. You like that, huh? Very scary. You go hide in a box, but I thought you don't get scared very easily by horror. What happened? I thought you don't get scared very easily. Aw, you silly Miku. Alright, we'll call it a night. Alright, so some of them you don't get scared easily, but the ones I read, you got scared. The ones I read got you scared. I see. Alright, good night. Good night, Miku. See you next time.